Good people of a great nation, I welcome you to the first discussion segment of Development Focus with Judy Ojo on ITV today, the October 20th of 2021. My first guest is here with me. You possibly in the last 3 weeks have heard about Pandora Papers. We used to hear Pandora Box. I don't know if you've heard Pandora Box, but now we have Pandora Papers. In 2016, we have Paradise Paper. Then we have in 2017, we have Panama Papers. Now we have Pandora Papers. What is all this about? Is a report of leak, financial details that was leaked and investigated by a team of journalists across the world. I've brought somebody here who will break it down for us. What does Pandora Papers mean? How was it done? I learned the investigation took some 2 years. What was the modus operandi to doing the investigation before? About 10 Nigerians allegedly were indicted in that Pandora Papers, which involved over 617 journalists across the world. It's the biggest leak in the world of journalism today. So I have here with me Yusuf Akinpelu, is the head of data desk of Premium Times newspaper. Premium Times, for your information, is the news media that was partner on this Pandora Papers. Yusuf, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. So our viewers want to know what does all this Pandora Paper, what does it mean? How did Premium Times get involved? What was the modus operandi of the research work, which eventually led to the indictment of 10 Nigerian, eminent Nigerians, and across 8 other African countries?
Yes, it was a sequel to the Panama Paper and the Paradise Paper. So there were existing partnership between the newspaper and the ICIJ, which is like a consortium of journalists across the world. So, and when this leak from about 14 firms, financial firms, leaked to a team of journalists, and it then became pertinent to examine the trove of the data and documents at the disposal of these journalists. So it will then begin, the document X-rayed is like a multi-terabyte trove of data, huge and bulky.
11.9 million, we are told, 11.9 million of documents were sifted through over 2 years period.
So it took 2 years to actually sieve this document and extract the information particular to each country. Premium Times was the only newspaper from Nigeria that was that partnered this group of worldwide journalists to examine this document. And in the long run, it's been said to be the biggest, like you said, the biggest investigative leak in the history of man.
So who leaked those 11.9 million documents? Was it an hacker? Did somebody hack into the database of those financial institutions? Or I know that there is an angle of the court documents that were also investigated and all of that. So I'm just looking at the modus operandi of how this whole investigation came about.
Okay, yeah, like I said earlier, there were 14 financial firms, part of which were believed to be had dealings with these companies that are used for offshore dealings. So they have at their disposal some of this information, and it then became something they decided to do, to bring journalists on board to examine how much of this information or the data they have at their disposal could be used for the betterment of their different countries. So the fact that they have that information and they needed to, it's also a global crave to ensure that we curb the illicit financial flows. It's also a way to also get that on board. So those were the mindsets, those were the thinking behind leaking those information to journalists. And it then became what journalists had to take their time. It's a 2-year investigation, take their time and see through and how it reflect on the different countries whose leaders or citizens were indicted.
So in Premium Times, how many of you were you also involved in that research?
Yes. So it's
so how many people were in that team in Nigeria in Premium Times who formed the team that worked with ICIJ, International Consortium of Investigative Journalism, to now work on that? I know it's not just one person that will be on that desk.
So it's more like a newspaper, a newsroom thing. Okay. But there were some persons that were assigned certain roles along the line.
So how many people in Premium Times were assigned roles on this?
We should be about 6, 7.
About 7 of you. Yeah. So when you go through those documents, what are you actually sniffing to see?
So it's just, the focus was clear. It's people in a country taking their money offshore to invest in secret haven, in tax haven, where they will pay less tax or no tax at all. So the focus was clear. There were private and public officials whose name popped up. So for what reason? When they did these things, when they took their wealth abroad, where were they then? Doing so, did they breach any law? Did they raise any sort of suspicion? So it was then discovered that, okay, for instance, if a person like Peter Obi, he was a governor when he incorporated some of these
Gabella investment or something,
and he had some of these trusts in the Jersey. So it then raised question about, okay, if you did this while in office, and what law have you breached? So the question out there is not just about him not declaring his asset. He also was a board member of one of those companies while in office, which is against the procurement law.
That's a conflict of interest. He was not supposed to be on the board of any of those companies.
Absolutely. So, which was against the Code of Conduct Act. So those are the things we were sniffing out for and trying to look. These persons whose name popped up, okay, their names here, their names here, what were they when they made those investments abroad? And what implication does, they are taking the investment abroad, what does it mean to the Nigerian people? Okay,
so Premium Times and International Consortium of Investigative Journalism have done their own bit. So October 3rd, this report was made public. And we learned that, Premium Times have been publishing in series, in phases, indictments of the supposedly 10 Nigeria indicted officials. So what has been the reaction since that publication was made open?
Okay, the reaction has been from different angles. We have had, maybe we should start from, for instance, we've had CSOs demanding more probe, accountability, and all of that. And there's also been reaction from the public, Nigerians too. Of course, we cannot exactly paint or weigh the extent of these reactions, but we've seen that some Nigerians have now seen why it is necessary for the public to be conscious of who lead them in terms of how they take money abroad. And one of the reactions too has been the FIRSC also saying they would probe anybody who is caught culpable for any of those infractions that are alleged upon the different persons indicted in the series. Likewise, we've also had the EFCC also inviting, said to invite Peter Obi. I think his meeting with them, which should be October 27. Okay. So those are some of the triggers, and it can just continue to get better as long as we do not stop having discussions around it like we are now. As long as we continue to drive discussions around it and ensure that the culpability of people in the course of all of this is ascertained and it is brought to a close, then we are on that way.
So I've also read that FIRS said they will investigate, and EFCC obviously is also investigating. But have you also made available the reports to these anti-corruption agencies like Code of Conduct Bureau, FRS, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, and all of the people who may have one thing or the other to do with either investigation or prosecution of this?
Yeah, so in the course of the reports, when they are being published, we usually reach out to the authorities in these different agencies and notify them about, okay, this is our findings here, this is our findings here, this is our findings here. We'd like to know what you would like to do or what you think will be done. Would you prosecute this person? Would you probe? Would you do this? So oftentimes they evade those questions. But I want to believe in the course of us reaching out to them was when they now made the release as a general attempt for them to continue to, or in an attempt to ascertain whether or not there's been any breach by any of these officials whose name popped up.
Okay, so in Africa, Nigeria happens to have the highest number of indicted officials, 10. We do have in Ghana, even the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, was one of those indicted. And this issue, for at least we know Peter Obi has spoken out. He has defended himself. He has said that he didn't breach any law. Is this not expected that people would deny any wrongdoing?
Yes, of course. Nobody would ever say I am wrong. Okay, oftentimes some persons might, but the reality is it's not just even about being wrong. It's about holding people accountable. The accountability of our process. That's why we often see some tepid response to some of these reports by the Nigerian public. And when they say, of course, maybe it's not clear that somebody has stolen, but when they say a thief is our thief, so we try to shield the person, or this person has done wrongdoing, so we try to shield the person because it belongs to us. So that mentality is one thing that we firstly have to nip in the bud. We also have to extinguish from our mentality. But whether or not somebody put out any defense, it's not just enough to say, okay, I didn't do this, when the available fact doesn't suggest it is right. So if he says he didn't do it and he was a member of the board of a company while he was governor, those are the questions that he has to answer, and he exactly has not been able to. And even when, because during the report he was interviewed by our team, and he was questioned that does he know that he had breached the law by not declaring his assets that he owned. He said he does not know that he was supposed to declare assets that he co-owned with other persons. And in fact, while that is true, I mean, why he had assets he co-owned with other persons, which he didn't declare, whether or not ignorance is not tenable before the law. So, and there were other ones too that he owned personally, like solely, that was the only beneficial, the ultimate beneficial owner of those assets, those trusts, which he didn't declare. So, whether or not
he was being clever by saying, no, I cannot declare what I co-own with somebody, but the one he actually 100% owned, there are some of them that he didn't declare, and the fact that he was sitting on board of and people have said this is Premium Times is doing an arched job against some of these people, particularly Peter Obi. I knew that your first report was on Peter Obi, and the reactions, particularly from our Igbo brothers, is, oh, you want to demonize him ahead of 2023. You want to truncate his political ambition. The man is a billionaire before he even became a governor. So this is being Premium Times is trying to rubbish and tarnish the image of this our shining light who we are even looking at as a presidential hopeful. Well, was there any motive to doing this?
Well, it's the job of the journalist to put the facts at its disposal out there. So the response by the public to whatever fact that is put out there, it's not controlled by the journalists. So it's expected that some persons might read meaning to the report based on their own existing bias or their own reality. But that does not remove the fact that this man breached the law, and that is what should be focused upon. Whether or not he has any ambition, or he belongs anywhere, or whoever he is, or whatever he might have held, or whatever he owns, is not even the primary, is not even the basic thing that we should be concerned about. Has he breached the law? That is what we should be concerned about, and that is what Premium Times did. and there was no motive behind trying to pull anybody down or whatsoever. It is understandable that some persons belonging to the public might see it that way, but the reality is still that, have you examined the facts before you? Did he breach the law? If he did, absolutely, wherever he is from, you just have to hold him accountable. And while we can give private individual, for instance, a pass for, okay, maybe you've amassed wealth and you think you do not have the confidence to invest in Nigeria, maybe because of the volatility of the naira, the currency, and some other issues around the Nigerian economy, and you took your wealth abroad, all well and good. But two things we have to note. First is, why should things be done in secrecy? We all understand what doing things in secrecy might portend. Why nobody is pointing accusation finger, but it's just for us to be cautious. And that's for private individuals. Now, talk about public individuals. We cannot give public individuals the same pass, the same slap in the wrist like we will for private individuals. Because first, if you are a public individual, you are denied of certain liberty. You are denied of certain privacy that you might even want to have. Because you are now in the public, you are controlling public fund. If you now begin to amass wealth while in office, even whether or not you are a billionaire before coming into office, we have to still ask questions that this you amassed in the course of you being in office, how did you get it? There is a law I understand in the UK that when you amass a particular threshold of wealth, is it £10,000? You must declare it, saying, okay, this is what I have amassed in the last 1 year, and it is amounting to this, it has exceeded this amount. If you don't, if it is discovered, it will be taxed. This is to ensure accountability. So whether or not he has investment is rich, that's not even it's valid. That's not even the point. But the fact that we must ensure that we hold people in office accountable.
So it's not. This is not about Peter Obi. There are 10 people involved
so far.
There is even a cleric, a popular pastor. All of these people, including a former Chief Justice of Nigeria and all of that. Now, all of these people, did you get to speak with them in the course of this 2-year investigation? Did you give them the benefit of fair hearing to defend themselves, to say, this is what we found about you? What have you got to say?
So, if you following the series of the report, each of them, whoever is alleged to have had those offshore trusts, were usually invited for interview, were reached out to. We wouldn't have done a complete job by just assuming, okay, we've done our own part. We do not reach out to these persons. It's not, but each of them, every of them were given the chance to speak their own side, and which some did and some didn't.
And so, to some that did you leave them off the hook? You didn't, when they were able to defend themselves, you feel that there's nothing to them, so you didn't even have to publish their...
Okay, the essence of reaching out to them is not whether or not we have evidence of they doing this thing, and we have documents to back them up. So now it's just for us to ask questions regarding what we have. Like, okay, you said you own this trust. Do you have them? Okay, some denied. Okay, but our documents show that you have them. Some might eventually have to cave in, like the judge, the Delta State judge, who was a judge, who was the one who was published yesterday, who had trust in offshore trust, which she used as decoy in the tax haven, and she didn't declare them, even despite being a judge of the country, who is the custodian of the law, who knows the law. So when she was told that, okay, do you have this? Initially she denied, but when evidence was placed before her, she caved in and said, okay, this is what I did, but I didn't have it while I was in office. But evidence also showed that you were a judge when you acquired this wealth. So you just question them. It's just for them to ask, okay, this is my own side of the story. Of course, they may try to be clever by defending that, but the fact they say is sacred. Opinion may be wavering, but facts are just clear. Okay, this is, you actually acquired this in this particular year, and this document showed that you truly did. So it's just for people to have fair, and which were their accounts were reflected in each of the reports.
Okay, so now this is about accountability in governance. This is about anti-corruption. Now, as any of those people you publish the report on, has any of them threatened to sue Premium Times for defamation of character or whatever? You know the nature and character of our political office holder. Even where they are guilty, they want to still say, I'm being maligned, it's a smear campaign, they want to dent my image. So has any of them written officially or not officially to Premium Times to say, we'll meet in court for defamation of character?
Well, so far it's just been insinuation by some persons, but there's been none that I am aware of.
All right. Okay. So now I read a communique that Premium Times Institute for Investigative Journalism and CISLAC, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, jointly released some, was it last week or thereabout, and calling for different reforms and different things that they are expecting government to do. One of which is that this should not be swept under the carpet like the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers leak or report of 2016-2017, where government just set up committees and that committee sat endlessly, and at some point everybody forgot about it. So this communique that CISLAC and Premium Center for Investigative Journalism issued, what reaction has it generated from different government agencies? Because there are different agencies of government, including Central Bank of Nigeria, including INEC, even in terms of campaign finance, including FRS and all of that. There were duty bearers on what they need to do on this report, what the public expectations are, or public expectations are on this report. So I don't know if you get to read that communique. So what have been the fallout or matters arising from there since it was published?
So the fact that EFCC invited Peter Obi, like slated a meeting for
27th of October.
So it is also believed that such communiques as that and such demand for accountability by these CSOs might have triggered those discussions, because for as long as discussions do not end by the publication of those reports, for as long as we're having this kind of conversation, for as long as people are discussing it, they are demanding meanings and explanations to all of these reports, we will continue to get somewhere. Like they say, a closed mouth does not eat dinner. So if we continue to say, oh, maybe because we do not think the Panama paper or the Paradise paper do not have absolute impact like we want, like they did in other countries, then we just keep it and sit back and relax. Then things will get worse. But for the fact that some persons would know, it's more like a checkmate. So for the fact that some persons, if I do this, it may not be totally secret. It may eventually become public and people will know. It may deter some persons for it. That's a plus. It may not be obvious, but it's a plus. It's an impact. And we should not even think that the Panama paper and the Paradise paper, for instance, never had any impact. The VAT, that's the Voluntary Asset and Income Declaration Scheme, that was launched in 2017, July 2017, could have been said to be a fallout from the Panama paper that was published in 2016. Okay. So, and that's because people were taking they had investment abroad, which they weren't declaring to the CCB, and they were holding public office. So that VAT was something that was launched to ensure that people were actually declaring their assets, and it gave them this 9-month window to bring in to say, okay, well, I didn't declare this before, now I'm declaring it. So it's like an impact. So these two won't be any different. It may be slow. The step to where we want to be may not be as fast as we want it. But for as long as we continue to demand and discuss it, demand accountability and discuss it, we will get somewhere.
Yeah, definitely we'll get somewhere. And I really appreciate the yeoman's job being done by Premium Times, particularly in the area of investigative journalism, because this is how we can hold our government officials to account. As we round off, because of your other engagement, what message do you think you want to pass to the public, and particularly the duty bearers, the anti-corruption agencies, This kind of investigation that you did, shouldn't you think that they are the one that should have done it? You know, EFCC should have been able to pick up things like this, or maybe join your team to also lend their own support to what you are doing. Did you even bother to reach out to them at any point in time?
Yes, we reached out to them when the report was to be published, asking them what they think they will do, since it was more like a 2-year investigation and it started as a covert investigation. So it was best kept until the whole thing was assembled into a whole. But in the course of releasing the report, they were reached out to and asked questions of what they will do. And we could see that they've started taking steps. We can just continue to ask them to get this through. It should not be just like a white elephant discussion and it's just blanket statement. It must be decisive. It must be decisive. And when I was talking about VATs, we said people did not declare their assets and they were being and we could see that even between 2019 and 20 and now, EFCC had prosecuted certain public officials, some of whom were alleged to have held back assets and not declared assets or owned assets outside of their jurisdiction. And we could see that this can be, if they say it can be like a link from, okay, the Panama paper was released, the VAT was also unveiled, and EFCC is also using the fact that some persons were not declaring, and even though that's the job of the CCB, were not declaring their assets and they were keeping back some of the assets and this and that. So they were using it as some of the cases they made against some persons who were said to have threat away public funds. And now back to the public. The fact that the public can now see that, okay, we've not actually been able to get rid of certain acts, corrupt practices around us. The public should be able to discern that when somebody is alleged to have done something wrong, we should be able to view it and assess it and say, oh, okay, whether or not it's something, everyone has biases and that's natural, but your ability to suppress it and examine issues to determine whether or not this thing is something you should have a rethink over is what stands one person away from the other. So the public should be able to continue to look at this with an open mind and not see it as a windshot of people you have affiliation with or people you hold in high esteem. Ask questions. What is important is accountability. For as long as we do not think holding these public officials and even private persons too accountable for their actions, then we may never get further than where we want to be.
So the pastor or the bishop that you indicted, is a private citizen, it's not a government official. What was the link you established that made you include him as part of this?
Okay, now again, one thing about all of these reports is maybe except public officials that had clear breach of the law by not declaring asset they own. That was clear. But for private individuals, the fact that Nigerians or somebody who is of public interest, like he has public followership, the fact that there are persons like that and they are wealthy, shouldn't the public know that, oh, this person is wealthy? So if tomorrow he feels that it doesn't have or is living a very austere life or a Spartan life, then you should begin to doubt that, oh, so the pastor was not, there was no part of the report that says, oh, he has done anything wrong. But the singular fact that he's a public figure that has large followership, that, oh, this person owns this. And sometimes too, we could also look at the moral angle and we should begin to think, oh, if as cleric you preach, people should be open, people should, they should not live a life of luxury. And we begin to think, okay, but you own this. So it's left to people to determine what they want to make of that or interpretation they really want to give to that. So this singular fact that he owns such wealth and it is kept in tax haven in a secret offshore company is also something that might trigger discussion around how you've amassed this wealth and you have company all over.
And what have you got to hide that you are taking your money to offshore havens, offshore tax haven? Is it that you are also dodging paying the necessary taxes, as even if the church is not paying tax, but as individual you are supposed to pay tax? Yes. So is it that you are trying to dodge payment of tax and all of that?
So those are the questions that this kind of report would
generate. So Code of Conduct has not said anything on its own.
Yes, and we just think, since even EFCC since this thing began earlier this month, EFCC had just spoken. FIRC had spoken, EFCC just did. So we can continue to think they will.
But Yusuf, why is it that you didn't do a comprehensive one report that, why are you doing it in phases, that this week you are taking on this personality, another week you are, is it deliberate, or we will have expected maybe a 30-page or 50-page report where all of these indicted persons, you establish this is what we did, this is what we found out, and people can say this is Pandora Papers on Nigeria. I don't know if you get my drift. We know it's a huge volume given the number of countries that are involved. So we know that it might be too big to have a comprehensive one universal report. But shouldn't each country just have one comprehensive report on Pandora Paper on Nigeria, and then you publish it, and then you can then do the serialization as you are doing? Why is that not the approach of Premium Times?
Okay, yeah. I want to believe it's more like a consensus of approach to connect with the people that are interested in the reports. So because the public you are telling this to may not have the patience to read a bulky report.
Okay.
So you have to give them how best, in very tiny digestible bits that the message can strike a chord. So, and that can only be done by taking it step by step, series by series. And it's also good when we have the suspense. So I think it's also good for the report. If you had known that, okay,
it's a thriller. So you are keeping people in suspense. Yes, watch out for more.
Keep them guessing. So that's also a plus too for the report. It adds beauty to the whole series. Okay,
I just have to let you go. I wish we can go on with this discussion, but I made the pledge. I made the promise that I will release you for your other engagement. But I want to thank you, Yusuf Akinpelu, for finding time to speak to us on these Pandora Papers. Maybe in the course of time we'll still bring you back to shed more light, or any other member of your team to come and tell us, maybe when there is change in reactions. And it's good that you put a face to the previous papers, Paradise and Panama Papers, that as a result of those leakages, as a result of those reports, the government responded in Nigeria by having that VAID, Voluntary Asset Information Declaration System, in place. I recall that at some points they were at airports, they set up cubicle at airport for people to come and update their records and all of that. So which government did for some 9 months or thereabout in 2017. So at least that is achieved, that has achieved something, and we hope that these Pandora Papers will also achieve some measure of success.
We hoped that the 2017 was done when I think at the second year of President Muhammadu Buhari's coming, whose mandate was etched on 3 major cardinal points. That's economy, stabbing, corruption, and security. So corruption here will come. It's one of the ways the government can establish its uncompromising stance against corruption by also taking this very serious and getting to the root of it.
And I do hope maybe the management of Premium Times will also send the president a copy, or a comprehensive copy of this report, also send copy to the Attorney General Minister of Justice, so that these are people who are somehow connected with the issue of prosecution. Maybe at least if it gets to the president's desk, he could also have copies for his ministers to say, here we are, let's spare thoughts on this and reflect, and so that it's also getting some measure of momentum. So anyway, Thank you very much, Yusuf, for coming, and do stay safe and stay blessed. We'll be back in a bit for the second and concluding segment of Development Focus with Judo Ojo on ITV. Please do stay tuned.